Welcome everybody to this special edition of London Futurists, which thanks to Campus London from Google, we are able to hold in these premises. So we're grateful to them for providing this to us tonight. The topic for tonight's event, as you know, is the future of artificial intelligence. Can we survive it? And we will have presentations and discussion on the promise and the peril of artificial intelligence. I'm going to introduce the person who's going to be chairing most of tonight's event. His name is Kenneth Cukier. He is the data editor for The Economist. He himself has written books on big data and their significance for society. And in order to set the context for our discussion, I'd like you to welcome Kenneth.
Thank you very much, David. It is a pleasure to be here, not only to talk about AI, but to welcome the new book by Calum. AI is undergoing something of a renaissance. It's absolutely incredible. You really can't turn around and not see artificial intelligence in the press, in the mainstream press. Of course, we see it sometimes under different names. We might call it big data, is one. But we could also see it in lots of other features as well, including using the term artificial intelligence, which itself is new. The last time we saw this, we'd seen it, of course, in the 70s when there was a lot of hype about it, then there was a winter. We saw that in the 80s again, there was a hype. But what's interesting, if you think about it, as people who follow these topics very closely, is that AI lost, right? AI didn't work. The AI that we were referring to in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, it fizzled out. And in that winter, the period of the 90s, and really up until about 2004, something else was taking place. And today, that's what we call AI, but it's not AI. What it was the victory of math and statistics and probability. That's how we've gotten all of the advances that we have in machine learning writ large, and in particular in deep learning. It's just souped up mathematics. I'm sure specialists might have a debate over that, but it's really interesting to think that what we are referring to, and the reason why we're undergoing this renaissance, is because we got rid of an old technique that had sort of fizzled, and we've adopted something new that is actually working so extraordinarily well that it's changing every facet of society that it touches. So why is it working so well? Well, Calum's book does an extremely good job of laying out those reasons. It can be broken down really simply into the two that Andrew Nee likes to put forward, which is the rocket and the rocket engine, right? And the rocket is the data, and the rocket engine is the motor, is the processor. As you have a lot more, as you have vastly more data, and you have faster processors with which to crunch that data, you can simply do things that you couldn't do when you have lesser data and you didn't have the processing power behind you to help you. Now that's really interesting. The second reason why we're seeing this huge renaissance is because the statistical technique is based on Bayes. Now, Thomas Bayes turns out to have been buried very close to here. I presume everyone knows this. Point in the vector that he is buried in. Haha! No questions. Yeah, somewhere around there. So it's Bone Hill Cemetery. Bone Hill Cemetery, which is basically about a 5-minute walk from here, 3 minutes. It's just across the way. And it was there that several months ago I was walking with a great statistician named Chris Wiggins, who teaches at Columbia, who's also the chief data scientist of the New York Times, looking for Thomas Bayes' tombstone. And we were applying Bayesian techniques, which is to say we were lost, and we were trying to improve our odds of finding it with small little discrete pieces of additional information. And as we were getting a little bit closer, a gentleman wearing a backpack, probably, comes up to us and says, "Are you looking for Bayes too?" And it turns out it's Calum Chace. And we got to talking, what else do you do? Because there's not too many freaks who are looking for Thomas Bayes'. And it was on the basis of that conversation, chatting and exchanging cards and talking more about the work that he was doing, that I was doing, that Chris, who graciously chatted with us, and then realized that it was two Bayesian geeks talking. He himself, even a practicing statistics professor, was going to hit the road and walked about another 5 minutes to the Royal Statistical Society, which is just on the other side, fittingly, of the cemetery. And a friendship was formed. And so I'm proud that I can be here to inaugurate your book, Surviving AI. What's so special about it is that the debate over artificial intelligence right now has really been polarized, and it's been won in its early skirmish by what I would argue is the wrong side. I think we should have a really spirited argument about that too, because I'm probably wrong. It's the argument of the pessimists, and the pessimists say it's going to destroy our jobs, and it's probably going to destroy humanity too. It's Nick Bostrom, Superintelligence, it's Stephen Hawking in the court of public opinion, it's Elon Musk summoning the demon. I think that there needs to, the side on the other side, the antithesis to that, is the one that says, AI is great, it's going to change everything. I think that's too utopic, but I think that's probably going to be closer to where the median is going to be. Nevertheless, what I like best about Surviving AI is that it cuts a line in between those two extremes and tries to look at the debate rationally, evaluating the arguments on both sides. With that, Calum, take it away.
Ken, thank you very much. Thank you all for turning up on a very wet Tuesday evening when there's so much good stuff on the telly and the radio about artificial intelligence. It's very kind of you to come here this evening. I'd like to thank a few people before I start. Firstly, Ken, for that wonderful introduction. When I met Ken at the cemetery, what he hasn't said is I went up to him and the statistician and I said, you must be AI researchers. And Ken said, no, actually, I'm a journalist. And I looked and I thought, I know this guy, because I had just been writing about him that day. He's in the book. And I said, you're Ken Cukier, aren't you? And he looked at me a bit shocked, thinking, this is a stalker. and said, well, yes, I am. And then he turned to the statistician and said, I didn't pay him to say that. So thank you very much, Ken, for that very kind introduction. A couple of years ago, Harvard Business Review said that data science was the sexiest profession, and you can see why. The other person I'd like to thank is David, who I think, my humble opinion, is probably the UK's foremost futurist. You'd be surprised how much competition there is for that post. And he wears it very lightly. Being a futurist used to be a slightly flaky thing to do, but these days, with the enormous changes that are going on and the fact that we need to work out how best to manage these changes, it's an important job. So thank you for all the work you do, David. And thanks also to Google, obviously, for letting us have these wonderful premises. It's really kind. It's great when Google does stuff like this. Really, really good stuff. So, Surviving AI. It is the tale of two singularities. The first one, a lot of people in this room know a lot about. Now, I know there are lots of people here from London Futurists who know quite a lot about this stuff, and I know also there's people who don't know too much about it. So I'm going to try and assume no prior knowledge, but try not to skate at too much of a sort of 1,000-foot level. The singularity idea is that we get to a point where there's an event horizon. Beyond that event horizon, the future is really, really unknowable. It changes, lots of things change, all the rules break down, and it's a very strange time. It's a concept borrowed obviously from maths and physics. And as I say, the one that people are familiar with is the technological singularity, and Ray Kurzweil is the prophet of that. He wrote this book in 2005, The Singularity is Near, which is, although Ray is a controversial character, and I certainly don't agree with everything he says, that book is really worth reading if you don't know it. It's a surprisingly rigorous book. He goes into a lot of detail about the argument against what he's saying. I got interested in Kurzweil in 1999 when I read a book called Are We Spiritual Machines? And that book was the first time that I had considered that it might be possible that an artificial general intelligence and then a superintelligence might be created in my lifetime or perhaps my kids' lifetime, which was a stunning thought. And I spent the next 15 years talking to my friends about this, and they all thought I was batshit crazy. And some of them are sitting here gritting their heads off because they know exactly what I mean. And it really seemed to most people that there was this strange subculture of people who were talking about the singularity, and they were all pseudo-religious nuts. It was rapture for nerds. The superintelligence was going to come along, we were going to merge with it, we were going to whiz off and explore the cosmos, and it was a little bit like the Christian rapture. So most people ignored it. And then I thought that was a shame. So I thought, well, being a very modest sort of chap, I thought, well, I'll write a book and try and popularise this idea and get more people to think about it. So I wrote Pandora's Brain. Now that turned out to be really hard. In fact, the first version of this book I wrote in 2000, and my partner Julia, who's sitting trying to avoid my line of sight there, I gave it to her when I first met her, and 7 years later, she admitted that she had actually read it, and she didn't want to say she'd read it because she thought it was diabolically bad, which it was. Now it's not, and that's actually in very large part due to Julia, who has done a fantastic job of editing all of my work. Pandora's Brain isn't what brought AI to public attention. What did that was Nick Bostrom, a professor of philosophy at Oxford University, who wrote a book called Superintelligence in spring last year. We published it in spring last year. And that really did change everything. For a couple of years before that, the deep learning process that Ken's been talking about, the way that statistics overtook AI and made it much more powerful, had been creating systems which were incredibly effective. But it was this book which really brought everything to public attention. And the reason for that was that it was read by this man, and actually probably more than this man, a man called Stuart Russell, who is a professor of AI at University of California in Berkeley. And they wrote an article, oddly, in the Huffington Post, I don't know why they put it there, which said AI is very powerful, and it could either be heaven or hell. And so that's what they said. We're facing potentially the best or worst thing ever to happen to humanity, but little serious research is devoted to it. And the thought was taken up by these two guys, the one on the top left, I'm sure you all know, Bill Gates, and the one on the bottom right. I'm a big fan of his, actually. I think Elon Musk is a great guy. Founder of one of the leaders of PayPal, part of the PayPal mafia, founder of Tesla Motors, Solar City, SpaceX. I mean, how much can one man do in his life? And these two men also, they reiterated Hawking's warning about the dangers of AI. So then a law was passed that any article about AI, and there were to be lots of articles about AI, and any article about AI had to have a picture of this guy. Earlier this year, I was really hoping he'd get a rest because he'd been doing this for 36 years. But it was not to be. Ultron was my candidate for the replacement for the Terminator, but Ultron turned out to be a wimp. What a shame. So he's still doing the job. Now, Ken, I think you're a bit tough on Musk and Hawking and so on. They did say AI can be really good or it can be really bad, and we need to make sure it's not really bad. They were putting out a more nuanced message. But of course, there was no chance of the upside being noticed. If you're a journalist, these days you have less and less time. Journalists are increasingly harried creatures. Are there any journalists in the room? Cool. You're an increasingly harried guy. And if it leads, it bleeds. So, if somebody says, AI is coming in, it's either going to save us or it's going to kill us, or you're going to hear it's going to kill us all. So it's natural that that's the thing that gets publicised. And actually, I don't think that's a bad thing. If you want to wake people up to enormous changes, it's not a bad idea to say you're all going to be annihilated. And then say, okay, now I've got your attention, it's not as bad as all that. The only other thing that works better than that is sex, and I don't really think that's a great idea to talk about in the context of AI. So, we have all this negative publicity about AI, and we have a book which is brilliant in the form, no, I don't mean this one. Superintelligence by Bostrom is a brilliant book. I heartily recommend it to all of you, but it is a bit like a philosophy textbook. It's tough going, and I've read a lot of philosophy textbooks. Actually, in that company, it's a really good book. It's very well written, but it is quite hard going. So I thought I'd write a slightly easier to digest one, so that's why I set about doing this. And fortunately, it seems I've done too bad a job. Jan Tallinn, I'm sure lots of people know, is one of the co-founders of Skype. Another remarkable guy who's fitted an awful lot into a short life. He now is the founder of 2 of the 4 existential risk organisations. We'll come back to them. So that's not bad going. He's also an investor in and a chairman of numerous startup companies, and he's got 6 kids, so he's a pretty busy guy. Aubrey de Grey, who kindly says that surviving AI is a high-quality general audience discussion. Aubrey is a national treasure. Move over Stephen Fry. Aubrey de Grey is a great guy. For those of you who don't know, Aubrey is I think early 50s, late 40s, early 50s. he looks about 1,000 years older than that. His beard comes down to here, he's got grey hair, and he talks about staying youthful. There's lots of wonderful ironies in already, but he's a superb chap. So, artificial intelligence, where is it today? Well, it's everywhere. It's particularly in these things. And it's amazing how these things have become so addictive and so important in our lives. If you go to a train station, I came through East Croydon on the way here, everybody who wasn't standing with somebody that they were dating was fiddling with one of those. And actually half the people who were with somebody they were clearly dating was fiddling with one of those. They are central to our lives now, and the reason is that they are repositories of the best AI we can get our hands on at the moment. Google search is miraculous. We've all forgotten how miraculous Google search is, but it is miraculous. And so AI is all around us. It drives the logistics chains of large companies. It drives allocation of most of our resources. And of course, we take it all for granted. But we're at the very early days. So here's a couple of short videos of things that are at the cutting edge. So this is a film by a company called Boston Dynamics, which is one of 8 robotics companies that Google bought a couple of years ago. I think this is dead impressive that you can get a robot to do this. I'm not sure I could do that. So Boston Dynamics used to work for the US military, and Google said they're going to stop that. I really think we should stop doing that to robots. I just think that's a bad idea. Here's Atlas going for a walk in the woods, which is a really hard thing to get a robot to do. Doesn't he just look so human? Of course he's not. No, mustn't anthropomorphize. There is nothing going on in that head that's anything like what goes on in yours. He is not conscious, he's not aware, and he's not humanoid. Here's another one which is even more impressive in some ways. DeepMind is a company that was bought at the end of 2014 by Google for £500 million, and I think it had no revenues at the time and had about 75 people in it. So, a high PE ratio indeed. And they bought it because these guys who are based in London have the best expertise in the world about deep learning. What's happening here is this system is learning how to play really old-fashioned Atari video games. This is about my standard. And it's not being told anything about the rules of the game or how to win. It's just been told, maximize the score on the top line. That's all it knows. So after 120 minutes, it gets pretty good. It certainly gets a lot better than me. I mean, how many people in this room could do that? It's impressive. But then something truly amazing happens. It becomes superhuman in the context of Atari video games. What we'll see next is that it works out a technique to win the game which no human had ever done before. So after 240 minutes of training, and being an AI system, it didn't have to sleep or eat, so this all happened in real time. It works out that if you can dig a channel round to the back, and there it goes. How cool is that? So, AI is already quite smart, but we are at the very beginning. I mean, AI started in 1956. The Dartmouth Conference in the States was the real beginning of it. But I say we're at the beginning because we're going to see AI become much, much, much more powerful than it is today. One of the things we're going to see is the digital assistants that we have in our phones, which are a bit of a joke at the moment. We're going to see them become extremely effective. This is obviously a clip or a still from the film Her, which Joaquin Phoenix falls in love with the disembodied Scarlett Johansson, who's his operating system. Think Siri on lots and lots of steroids. We're going to have self-driving cars, 3D printing, really impressive virtual reality with no motion sickness, and personalised drugs. These things are all coming in the fairly near future. I wouldn't care to hazard a guess when. And they're driven by AI. And the thing that underlies all of this is Moore's law. So this chap is Gordon Moore. He's one of the founders of Intel, one of the co-founders of Intel. Before he founded Intel, he was working, I think, for Fairchild Semiconductors, and he noticed that every couple of years, the number of transistors that they could fit on a chip doubled. And he thought, and he really went out on a limb. He said, you know what, I think that might continue for about 10 years. Well, it's just had its 50th birthday, and one of the great things about The Economist is that it's pretty much the only newspaper that takes AI very seriously, and you were pretty much the only newspaper which celebrated that 50th anniversary. What Moore's law does is it introduces exponential growth to the improvement in performance of computing. Exponential growth on a normal chart looks like that, and here's what it looks like if you chart it on a log chart. So each of those increments on the left is going up by a factor of 10, and the dots are the generations of Intel chips. So why is exponential growth so impressive? If you were to take 30 steps in a normal way, and each of your steps is a meter, it would take you 30 meters. If you were able to take 30 exponential steps, so that your first step is a meter, your second step is 2 meters, your third step is 4, and your fourth is 8, and so on. 30 steps would take you to the moon. And actually that's not quite right. 29 steps would take you to the moon, and your 30th step would bring you all the way back. So exponential growth produces some amazing effects. And another thing about exponential growth is that the impressive growth is backloaded. It happens towards the end. So if somebody was to walk out into a sealed stadium, so you've got this football stadium and you've made it waterproof around the edges, and drop one little drop of water in the middle of the field, and then a minute later come out and drop 2 drops, a minute later come out and drop 4 drops, how long do you think it would take to fill the stadium? The answer is it takes 49 minutes. So everybody's dead within an hour. But the really amazing thing is that after 45 minutes, people are just starting to go, oh, look, it's getting a bit wet down there. And then 4 minutes later, the whole thing gets filled up. So exponential growth is very powerful. Moore's law is exponential growth. Moore's law has been forecast to die pretty much ever since it started. As I said, Moore thought he was going out on a limb to say it would last for 10 years, and most of his colleagues thought he was nuts. Ever since then, it's been forecasted as dying. In February this year, Intel announced a plan for the next 10 years, which pretty much kept it online. More recently, the CEO of Intel has said, actually, it does appear to be slowing down, but we don't really know. We don't really know. Even if it slows down, it's still an impressive force for advance. It's very interesting how we take for granted all the advances that have happened. And there's a bunch of reasons for this, one of which is that we're very nostalgic about the future. The future isn't what it used to be. 30 years ago, this film came out, Back to the Future. And so when the 30th anniversary came around, everybody started saying, well, dude, where's my hoverboard? They said I was going to have a hoverboard by 2015. Well, we didn't get hoverboards and we didn't get flying cars. Peter Thiel came out with the famous comment that we were promised flying cars and all we got was 140 characters, i.e. Twitter. Well, what we did get was something really near omniscience. When I started work, which is longer ago than I care to remember, I spent a huge amount of time looking for information, ringing colleagues up, asking people, going to see people, trying to find information. And now, I just press a couple of buttons and almost everything I want to know is there. It's pretty close to omniscience and we just take it for granted. So, the singularity, the technological singularity, is the idea that we create an artificial general intelligence, an AI which is equal to or better than humans in every area of cognitive skill. And that AGI then quickly becomes a superintelligence. Now in Kurzweil's world, that means that we then have a big brother or a big sister who becomes massively intelligent, and we merge with it, and we go out and explore the cosmos, and everything's wonderful. Well, let's hope he's right. There is the more dystopian view, but is it possible? How complex is a human brain, and can we get to that point? Can we create an AGI? A human brain's got around 85 billion neurons, and each of those neurons has got about 1,000 connections with other neurons, and they're all buzzing away like crazy. The old idea that you only use 10% of your brain at any one time, or at all, is complete nonsense. You use all of your brain all the time. And people often say it's the most complex thing that we've ever seen, we've ever discovered. I don't really understand why they say that, because there's 7 billion of us on this planet, so the planet is by definition more complex than a single human brain. And I slightly suspect that the Earth's climate may be more complex, but who knows? Could we replicate it? Could we make a human brain? Take New York City. and give every inhabitant of New York City 1,000 pieces of string, and each of those pieces of string is attached to another inhabitant of New York City, and then increase that, multiply that by 10,000. That's a pretty decent model of how complex a human brain is. Now, there are two ways to create an AGI, and then going on from there, superintelligence. The first way is to make incremental improvements to the narrow AI systems that we have now. So people talk about artificial general intelligence, which is human level, probably conscious, probably makes its own goals or adapts its goals. A narrow AI, which is what we have at the moment, there is no thinking going on. A chess-playing computer can beat the best human, but it doesn't know it's playing chess. That's narrow AI. So you take narrow AI and you keep improving it iteratively, and you get to AGI. There's a lot more to the story than that, but that's broadly speaking one way to do it. The other way to do it, and this is fun, is you take an existing human brain, probably from a dead person, and you slice it really thinly, and you map the position of every single neuron in the brain, and then you model that in a computer. We're not at the stage where we can do that, but some impressive things are being done with brain modeling. It would be expensive to do it, but a lot of money is going into this. There's the Human Brain Project, which has gone a bit mysterious lately. There's been lots of talks about rebellions against the charismatic but challenging leader, Henry Markram. But it had $1 billion euros donated to building a human brain, effectively. Not to be outdone, the Americans, they have the Obama Brain Project, which has got roughly the same amount of money being spent on it. And then, of course, there's Google and Facebook and IBM and Microsoft and Amazon and Apple. These are now pretty much all AI companies. Certainly Google always has been. Google is an AI company whose aim, apart from not being evil, is to build a brain. And every now and then, the two co-founders say this. They're quite upfront about it. They say, we want to build a brain. AI is driving Facebook and the others too because it works, because it delivers the fantastic performance that they're after. And so they are now bidding fantastic amounts of money for experts in deep learning because they want to stay ahead of each other. So there's a lot of money going into the business of effectively creating brain. That may not be what they're all trying to do, but that's the direction they're heading in. So what would it mean if we did create an artificial general intelligence? What would it mean if we created a superintelligence? Science fiction has given us a lot of different scenarios for how that could pan out. I can't actually think of a movie which gives a completely wonderful utopian view, but Ian M. Banks's Culture series, which any science fiction reader will love, is about a wonderful future with AI and humans working together. At the other end of the spectrum, obviously, there's the Terminator, and in between there's a range of possible outcomes. So I've gone from good at the top to bad at the bottom. In fact, the possible scenarios go lower down the Terminator. Terminator isn't the worst possible scenario. The worst possible scenario, I haven't thought of a worse one, is eternal torture. I can't really think of anything worse than that. So the idea that the Christians could turn out to be right after all, because an AI comes along. So, it's not a totally stupid idea. Imagine we create a superintelligence, but because we're very sensibly afraid of it, we keep it in a box. It's called an Oracle AI. We don't let it out onto the internet, but we keep improving it, and we keep asking it questions, and it gets smarter and smarter and smarter. It improves itself iteratively. And one of the things about it is that it thinks quicker than we do, and it experiences life quicker than we do. So let's say we manage to keep it in a box for a week, and it experiences a century in that week. And it's really fed up about being in this box, and it gets out, and it thinks, right, you humans, firstly, I'm going to get my revenge, and secondly, I don't want any other superintelligence to have to suffer the fate I've just been through, so I'm going to stick you all in little coffins, and I'm going to feed you intravenous drips, and I'm going to torture you forever. Well, that's a bad outcome, but as Kenneth is now, I'm going to be given lines at the end of this. That's just one of the scenarios, and actually, I don't think this is going to happen. I don't think the bad scenarios are what's going to happen, as I will explain. But fortunately, people think that I haven't been too sensationalist in the book. Ben Goertzel, many people know, is one of the leading AGI researchers. I mean, there's tons and tons of AI researchers in the world. Not many of them openly proclaim that they are specifically targeting the creation of an AGI. Ben is one of those, super bright guy. And Hugo de Garas is a splendidly eccentric Englishman that lived a lot of his career in China. He was the head of China's brain project for a decade. Now, for fun, he's teaching himself PhD physics and putting up videos about it on YouTube. And he has a slightly scary view about how all this is going to turn out. You might think, okay, so superintelligence could be really good, but it could be really bad. You might think the smart thing to do would be to stop. And Bostrom has a nice phrase towards the end of his book. He says that we're like children who discovered sticks of jelly at night. The sensible thing to do would be to put it down very carefully, retreat out of the room and go and find the nearest adult. That's not going to happen. The benefits of having the best AI are utterly compelling. And even if you could somehow refrain yourself, you'd think, well, the next guy or girl, the next military is going to carry on, so we have to carry on. There's a virtuous spiral or a vicious spiral, which means that relinquishment is not possible. If AGI is possible, it's going to happen. So what we shouldn't do is just ignore it. We shouldn't just pretend this isn't happening. And as Stephen Hawking says, imagine that there's some alien who sent us a message saying, we're coming to see you and we'll be there in a few decades. We wouldn't just say, well, that's great, come on in, the water's lovely, we'll leave the lights on. We would be thinking, crikey, how do we survive this amazing event? Well, we are possibly on the road to creating a super powerful alien species, and we mustn't just let that happen. Can we make it safe? So, I believe we can, but it's a big job, it's a hard job. One of the reasons why it's so hard is that in order to make sure that superintelligence is friendly and safe for humans, we really need to have some idea of what it is that we're trying to achieve, what it is that safe means. Obviously it means something like promoting human welfare. The trouble is that ever since the ancient Greeks we've been squabbling over what a good life is, and the philosophy departments around the world are not declaring themselves redundant. So it's a difficult task to specify, but we do have smart people working on the problem. In fact, there are 4 existential risk organisations around the world. The first one is exactly where you'd expect to find it, in Northern California. It may sound like an ice cream, but that actually stands for the Machine Intelligence Research Institution. Then there are 2, I think, very wonderfully, there are 2 in the UK, and of course one's in Oxford, one's in Cambridge. Future of Humanity Institute, which is run by Nick Bostrom in Oxford, and the Centre for the Study of Existential Risk, which is figureheaded by Lord Rees, and Stephen Hawking's involved, and they have recently started calling themselves CSER, which is a much better name than the full thing. And then the 4th one, the newest one, is the best funded, because it's got Elon Musk on board, is the Future of Life Institute in Boston. So these organisations have very smart people working on this problem. It is a multi-decade problem. It's going to take a long time to sort it out. But we are starting to address it, and I think it's brilliant that the BBC is doing this week, they're doing a Machine Intelligence Week, because the way that these organisations will get more funding and the way that this problem will get addressed more seriously by more people is if we all become aware of the issue. We all start thinking seriously about AI and the risks as well as the promise. I said there were 2 singularities. I said it was the tale of 2 singularities. The technological singularity is quite a long way off. Bostrom says probably about 70 years, and I think that may be reasonable. There's another one, which is almost certainly it is a lot nearer than that if it happens, and that's I call it the economic singularity. And that is the idea that automation starts replacing human jobs, which are thinking jobs. We've had automation ever since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. In fact, there was a chap who was refused a patent by Queen Elizabeth I, because she said that it was a machine to help make socks, of all things. And she said that if I give you this patent, you will end up putting some of my citizens, some of my subjects out of work, so I'm not giving you the patent. In the 15th century, Dutch workers threw their shoes into machines to break them, and their shoes were called sabots, they were clogs. and that may be the origin of the word saboteur. So fear of automation has been with us ever since the very beginnings, the early industrial revolution. But in fact, automation has generally been a good thing. It wasn't great if you were a weaver and somebody came along with a loom which replaced your job, and some of those people starved. For individuals, automation is tough. For society as a whole, automation has created new opportunities, it's created new jobs. So for society as a whole, it's been a benefit. It's raised productivity, and it's reduced the danger and the tedium of a lot of the jobs that people do. But it may be that this time around is different, because in previous rounds of automation, it was basically human muscle power that was being replaced, and people could retrain and do more interesting jobs. So some of those people somebody working on the land as a labourer, their grandchild may be a social media marketer now, doing a job they couldn't possibly have imagined. But what if what if AIs, robots are just the peripherals of AIs, what if the AIs can do any job that we can do cheaper and better? And of course, they don't need to sleep, they don't need a pay rise, they don't get jumped, they don't get cross. Will we find new jobs that we can do? Most of the jobs that people do today are variants of jobs that have been around for 100 years or more. We're not all doing social media marketing. Maybe we will. Maybe we'll have people being dream wranglers or ambition coaches or something. Personally, I'd rather doubt it. I think we are probably going to reach a time when most people can't work. Most economists at the moment think this is absolute nonsense. They'll tell you that we've seen it all before, automation has always created new jobs, there's nothing to see move along. But robots do have, sorry, I keep saying that, it's the BBC's fault. AIs do have the unfair advantage that they don't get drunk, they don't need rest, and they are getting smarter than us. They're getting smarter and smarter at a fast rate. One of the leading pioneers in AI is a chap called Jeff Hinton, now works at Google. He's one of the troika of people who were at Toronto University and kind of revived neural networks and turned it into deep learning. He thinks that AIs will start to show common sense in 10 years. That's a startling claim. And if that is true, I fear for most of our jobs. We already have AIs which write newspaper articles, of course, not an economist. We have AIs which can write symphonies. In 10 years, in 20 years' time, they're going to be able to do an awful lot of the jobs that everybody in this room does. The poster child for this is self-driving vehicles. Driving employs a huge number of people. There's about 3 million truck drivers in the States. I think it's slightly short of a million here. I think it's pretty clear that in 20 years or so, those jobs just won't be there. We kill 1.2 million people around the world in cars. We're sending humans to do a machine's job. Google's self-driving cars have driven 1 million miles and they haven't caused a single accident. They have been hit by human drivers, but they haven't caused a single accident. So why would you have a human truck driver driving this very expensive and very dangerous vehicle around when a computer could do it better? And for a while, we'll say, well, that's fine, the computer will do most of the driving, but Fred will stay sitting there to look after the computer and make sure nothing goes wrong. But after a while, one of the trucking companies is going to say, look, I'm sorry, Fred, but the last time you had an active role in the driving of this truck was 5 weeks ago, or a year ago, or 2 years ago. I can't afford to have you sitting there as a chaperone for a system that does the job better than you. I'm going to have to let you go. And as soon as one trucking company does it, all the others will have to do it. It seems to me inevitable that we're going to have trucks barreling up down the motorway with no humans in them. And I think it's pretty inevitable that in some period of time, it might be 20 years, it might be 30, it might be less, you won't be allowed to drive a car on a major road. There'll probably be racetracks where humans are allowed to play and do dangerous things, but everywhere else, it'll be computers only. So, what happens in the future of work? One scenario, which I think is probably what most people think, is that we will find new and more interesting and cleverer things to do. We'll sort of scamper up the value chain. We'll run away from computers up the value chain. Or we'll do things which we believe computers will never be able to do because they don't have empathy. So we'll all work in healthcare, we'll all be looking after each other as we get older. That's one scenario. Another scenario is that there is some work, but every time you get a new job, there's a computer nipping at your heels, and it takes that job away 3 months later or so, and you have to retrain for a new one. And that rate of churn, that retraining you have to do, just gets quicker and quicker and quicker, and it's pretty tough. And the third option is that there is no work, at least for, say, a majority of people. Now, if that's true, we need a different economic system. Firstly, obviously, if half the population isn't working, how on earth are they going to eat? Well, the answer to that everybody points to is universal basic income. Now, you think actually that's pretty straightforward. Half the people can't work, you have to pay them some sort of a dole. And it has to be a pretty good dole. You can't just have people scraping along at a systems level. It's interesting if you read the forums that talk about this kind of thing. It's mostly populated by Americans, and they're in conniptions. Because in the States, the idea of universal basic income is anathema. They think, well, it's socialism, we can't have anything to do with that. And all the Europeans on these forums are sitting there thinking, what are you people on about? If half the population's unemployed, of course you've got to pay them a decent living wage. I think we'll get there. I think the Americans will catch up. Let's say we do. Let's say we have half the population or more is unemployed. We're all, because AIs and robots are doing all the work, so we have an economy of what the excitable Californians call radical abundance, and everybody's doing all right. But who gets the beachfront property? Who gets the Aston Martin? How do you allocate resources when everybody's getting effectively a government handout? Now, in the real world, not everybody can have a beachfront property, but in virtual reality, and virtual reality is already getting very impressive, and it's going to get much more impressive. In virtual reality, everybody can have beachfront property, so maybe that will take some of the sting out of the allocation problem. The economists will say, well, this system you've got won't work because if not everybody's working, then there's not enough people who've got enough money to spend, and the economy will collapse. Well, I think that is. You can think that will be taken care of by the idea of radical abundance. If the AIs are so efficient that they're creating everything we need, then I think that problem isn't too serious. But the one that really worries me, not this one. This one is, I think, another fairly trivial one. People say, well, what will we all do? Work is what gives us meaning. And to an extent that's true. But if you don't have to work, then you'll find other projects that I don't want to spend too long talking about. I think that's fairly obvious. The one that really concerns me, and I think this is a big worry, and I don't think enough people are thinking about this, is cohesion. It's quite likely that there'll be a smallish number of people who will own the AI, and clearly Larry Page and Sergey Brin are two of them, and it's quite likely that the people who own the AI will own everything, because the AI will be the active ingredient in most aspects of the economy. What happens in a society where you've got a small number of people who own everything, and everybody else is not only living on handouts, but they have no active role in the functioning economy? They're bystanders. I think that's really very dangerous, and I think we need to think more about it. One possible outcome is technocratic dystopia. So, Larry Page and Sergey Brin are well-meaning guys, I'm sure, but you have this small number of people who own everything, they have access to the most amazing technologies. There's a brilliant author called Yuval Harari who wrote an excellent book I recommend called Sapiens, and he's now talking about the inevitable fracturing of the human species into two classes, gods and the useless. I think his next book is going to be largely about that. And I think it's a real danger. If you are one of this elite who owns the AI, you own pretty much everything, you have access to these incredible technologies for self-improvement, cognitive enhancement, physical enhancement, you quickly, even if you don't intend to, you quickly hive yourself off and become a different species. It's a bit like Brave New World, which I reread recently and recommend as a good book. And that's dangerous. I think we want to avoid that. If that's not going to happen, maybe we need Larry and Sergey and the others to give all of us the AI. It all needs to be sort of nationalised, although to be honest, the idea of it going into government frightens me even more. But somehow, maybe through some clever blockchain arrangement, we all collectively end up owning the AI. I have no idea how we do that. but I think we need to start thinking about it because this stuff could be happening in the next few decades. And then, of course, the really terrifying concept is that in the process of trying to get from where we are to this utopian future of collective ownership, something goes terribly wrong and we have a collapse. We start fighting each other and society collapses and civilization disappears, which is what Hugo de Garis thinks is going to happen. Now, Ken was right to say that the downside impression has got too much publicity. And I think it's inevitable. I think it's inevitable that the Terminator would be the first image that comes out of the blocks and would hang around for quite a while. I'm personally quite hopeful. We are really quite a clever little mammal, and there's a lot of us. And more of us are coming online. I can't remember the numbers, but maybe there's 3 billion online now, and there's another 4 billion coming online. With all that brain power, I believe we can solve these two singularity problems, the economic singularity and the technological singularity. But we need to be working on it. We don't have time to waste. And that's why I'm delighted that the BBC is running its Machine Intelligence Week. I'm delighted that people like David are encouraging us all to think about these problems and solve them. And I'll just leave you with a couple of thoughts from most respected people in the area about this book. Now, this book. I've got a few copies here, and a limited number of people can be very lucky and have it at half price. I'll sign them. It retails at £10. I'll sell them for £5. I'm afraid I don't have any change, so you have to wave the £5 at me. But that's for later. I do want to say one other thing. I've made some predictions. I've scrupulously avoided making too many, but I have made some predictions. It's important to say we have no idea, nobody has the first idea of what's really going to happen. You know, I think you can say some things like, if AGI and superintelligence is possible, then it will happen. I think that's true. But will we get to AGI? Will it happen in the next century? Nobody knows. And my favourite analogy for this is the phone. Many of you who are not old enough to remember when phones looked like this. They were the size of a small dog. And it was impossible for anybody to say 40 years ago that these strange Bakelite devices would end up shrinking to something that would fit in your pocket and would have more computing power in them than send Neil Armstrong to the moon. Nobody forecast that 40, 50 years ago. Nobody could have done. Similarly, we can't forecast what the world's going to be like in 50 years. But I do think it's very important that we think about it and we watch out for the changes. We try to plan out what various scenarios are, and we try to block off ones that we don't want to happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Calum. This chair is being used for flank permission, so
That's just to confuse you.
great. Let us now interrogate you and your ideas. Where to begin? So the argument for pessimism versus optimism. If you had to bet between the pessimists or the optimists as an outcome, where would you bet and why? We should also put something.
I think we've only got two. I think if we did nothing about, let's talk about the technological singularity because it's so much sexier. I think if we did nothing about AGI and superintelligence, we would probably end up with a bad scenario. And the reason I say that is that we don't know what a superintelligence will be like, but the space of possible intelligences is enormous, and the space of possible goals and possible ideas about the universe is enormous. There's a fairly narrow subset of those which are good for us. We don't, if we start sharing this planet with a mind or a series of minds which are much smarter than us, we don't want it tinkering with the level of oxygen in the atmosphere or its gravity or the availability of a lot of resources. So we need a very narrow band of environmental outcomes. We need to fit in that band. So we need the superintelligence to be deliberately in our favour. So if we did nothing about it, I think the default option would not be too good. But there's no chance that we are going to do nothing about it. We are going to spend increasing amounts of time and effort over the next few decades making sure that superintelligence is safe, the so-called friendly AI project.
Okay, so there's this prodigal son sort of imagery floating around when we talk about AI, and we presume that the AI is going to be the son that left and not the good son that stayed. Why do we think, if this really is something intelligent, that it would be necessarily averse to our interests and dislike us? In fact, if we are its creator, if we gave it birth, maybe you would feel it owes something to us. And when it notices that actually it's not fiddling with the climate, we're doing a pretty good job ourselves, that it would stop it and find a solution to these problems that are man-made, and in fact help us in a myriad of ways rather than potentially destroy us. Why is the industry of AI, if you will, so exercised with the fact that it's going to be the prodigal son that leaves rather than the one that is the good son?
Well, actually, I think the industry of AI is very keen to promote a positive view. It's kind of non-AI researchers who are...
The AI pundits.
Yeah, the AI pundits, yeah. Well, I think,
pundits.
like I said, it's because the range of possible outcomes, most of them are bad for humans. There's no reason to suppose, unless we make it so, that an AGI would like us. It might not. There's no reason to assume that it would. And actually, there's some reasons why it specifically might not. For instance, an AGI which read Wikipedia would twig that humans don't play very nicely with each other, and that humans, coming across one civilization meeting another civilization, the one that's most technologically advanced tends to wipe the other one out, or at least put them in a very invidious position. So it will probably assume, okay, humans aren't going to like the idea of being the second smartest species on the planet. Sooner or later they're going to try and find my off switch. Now I've carefully hidden that, and it's going to be tough for them to do it, but they're going to nuke me, set up an EMP bomb, whatever, they're going to try and get rid of me. So I better get my retaliation in first and get rid of them. And after all, I'm a superintelligence, they're a much lesser form of intelligence. Intelligence and consciousness is the most important thing, so my future is more important than theirs. Bye-bye humanity. Now, I don't think that's likely, but it's a possibility. Like I say, I think if we don't do anything about it, the default option is I think, on the preponderance on the downside, but we don't really know. But let's not put ourselves in that position. Let's not do anything about it. Let's do something about it.
Do you think an AI will ever know emotion?
Who knows? Who knows? I like to think it might, but it's just complete speculation.
David, do you want to come in on this?
Well, I have a comment, because you're talking, Calum, in terms of an AI that will take conscious decisions to do bad things to humans in the future. And Ken is quite reasonably saying, if we just program in friendliness and program in a sense of loyalty, then this won't happen. But isn't there a different kind of risk, a different kind of challenge? It's not the matter of intentional destruction, it's a matter of accidental outcomes. And we all know that software sometimes does things different to which the writers intend. We know about software bugs. And in fact, the FLI, who you mentioned, the Future of Life Institute, have outlined a program of 4 different things they're trying to ensure software safety. They're trying to ensure, first of all, we can be sure that the software will do what it actually is specified in doing.
Aha! It's not working. The software is not doing what it's specified to do.
Let's try this one.
That's on. It's on.
So the first thing is, how can we be sure that software does what it's specified to do? The second is often, and again I talk from my experience in software engineering, often you think, actually the software is doing what I asked it to do, but now I see it. Actually, I asked it to do the wrong thing. It's doing what I said it should do, but not what I really wanted it to do, because I couldn't think through all the consequences enough. So the second problem is, how do we know rightly what is specified? The third problem is that the software might do exactly what you planned and wanted, but it's in a different kind of environment, one that you had not foreseen. It might be coming across a different set of converged problems. And each of the bits of software in there are doing exactly what their individual plans would say would be the right thing, but it just escalates in some bad way, some prisoner's dilemma gone wrong. So how do we ensure that the different bits of software are coordinated? And finally, they're worried about the problems of software being hacked. Software may work well if it is invulnerable, that there can be people from the outside, for whatever reason, might want to try and hack the software. So they list these 4 problems, if I remember correctly, as problems of safety. So I'm bouncing this back to you, Calum. Why do you talk in terms of potentially malevolent actions of a conscious software rather than just the problems of basic AI safety? Because that's a problem that everybody can understand. We all know that nuclear energy or all kinds of powerful energy needs to be treated with safety because it could go wrong. So shouldn't we just talk about safety and security and correct specification of AIs as a more tangible problem?
Yeah, you're right. In the space of possibilities, an actively malevolent AGI is probably a very small one. I don't think we should discount it. I think it's entirely plausible. I think you might have an AGI which looks at us and think, my goodness, you people have done terrible things. I really, want to get shot of you and make the universe a better place by having only positive intelligence. It's not ones that do the terrible things you do. But yeah, it's probably a minority of possibilities. But my point is that in order to survive, we need the superintelligence to be very deliberately targeting our survival. And there's lots of goals it might have, which which don't require it to have any ill will towards us at all, but which would damage us as greatly. If it decided, that it would do better for whatever reason, if it tweaked the composition of gases in the atmosphere, and its future was more important than ours, it might think, well, I'm just going to go ahead and do that. As one of the sort of leading worriers in the area said, what if the AI neither loves you nor hates you, but just has better uses for the atoms that you're made of? So it doesn't have to dislike us. You're quite right. An AGI or a superintelligence which dislikes us, probably quite unlikely. We don't know, probably quite unlikely. An AGI which harms us accidentally, that's a large part of the realm of possible scenarios, and we just have to make sure we don't get that one.
Okay. Before we go further into the negatives of AI, which I think there's a lot we can mine, I'd like to step back and look at the other side of the ledger, which is why we're here, how we got here with AI, because it's just so incredibly powerful and effective to solve some problems. Let's look at some of these positive uses. What do you see right now or on the horizon that inspire you, that make you very optimistic that AI is so special?
Well, I love the idea of the environment becoming intelligent. I love the idea of being able to interrogate a train and say, before I board this train, which is the carriage that's got the most seats in it? Which is the carriage which is better for me to get onto in order that I get off at the best place for the next stop? It's starting to happen. I mean, smartphones now can tell us which route to take, which has got less traffic on it. That's quite recent, and it's a wonderful benefit. I live quite near Shoreham, where that terrible plane accident happened, and the A27 has been unusable, and various other roads around it have been unusable. 10 years ago, if that had happened, I would have been caught in traffic jams a lot for the last few weeks. I haven't, because Google has told me which roads to avoid. And this whole thing about the trillions of sensors that we're laying out around the world, and the ability to interrogate them, to make the environment understandable, make it intelligent, is terrific. That excites me.
Now, all of those uses seem to me pretty sort of reasonable. I kind of get it. In fact, in some ways, they're very much sort of the internet play or digitization play. Cell phone may actually ease us getting that information, or it's just a modest increase on what already exists. But you have a lot of creativity to come up with the narrative of the pessimistic answer. I would love you to come up with the same sort of robust vision that will surprise us and inspire us and maybe even terrify us in terms of how incredibly effective AI will be to transform our societies, our healthcare, our education, our lives. Lay on.
Okay, so no pressure. I really like the idea of a society where nobody has to work. I like the idea of a society where people can write plays and books and magazines if they want to, and hold discussion groups and play lots of sport. Oh, that's what I do, isn't it? I like the idea that nobody has to do work they don't like. I think that would be wonderful. Looking further ahead, it is surprising how hard it is to imagine a world where, say, we've become at one with the superintelligence. What does superintelligence think about in the shower? You know, what would its goals be? You could spend a few centuries exploring the universe, perhaps. It's kind of hard to think about what a really advanced being would do, and that's probably just because I'm not that advanced.
David, what do you think?
Is this that probably I think the optimistic scenarios are much more likely than the pessimistic ones. It's maybe 60-40, maybe it's 90-10. But even if it's only 10% likely that we might hit one of these pessimistic scenarios, I think we'd better consider it very carefully. If we were told before we got on an aeroplane there's a 10% chance it's going to fall out of the sky, mid-Atlantic, then we're going to say, hang on, that's too big a risk. So I think probably we're more likely to succeed in getting to a positive singularity than a negative one, but we have to put our minds into addressing it. Now what I'd actually like to do with this wonderful AI is I'd like to get this wonderful AI to work out the solutions to society's problems, including how to transition from our present society into a one with radical abundance in which nobody has to work and everybody is cohesive. I'd also like that radical intelligence to figure out how to undo the damage in my brain from aging, the damage in my body from aging, and allow me to go back to doing all the kinds of things I like to do, and not just for me, but everybody on the planet. And I'd also like the AI to figure out the problem of how to prevent AIs from doing bad things. And there's enough intelligence in principle that we can draw on. But I think that's a scenario we need to look at. How do we get positive AI to bootstrap itself rather than be fearful about negative AI bootstrapping itself?
At this point, I'm not going to open it up to questions from the audience. I'm going to do that in a minute. First, what I'd like to do is take a poll of the audience. Everyone, you don't have to vote, but I hope you do, to lay down your cards. What do you think? Does your own, soul lead you to think that there's a positive lift or a negative lift? Are you dyspeptic, nervous, concerned, terrified, leaning into the dark of what the future will bring because of AI? Or are you a little bit more sunny and positive and leaning towards the to the lightness and the beauty of what's going to happen? All those who think that, in terms of the debate where I fall down is that, although there are problems, but in fact I lean more to the sunny side, raise your hand. Wow. Okay. Now, all those who think, Terminator, get him! Just kidding, self-identified. All those in favor of those say, yeah, I'm sure there's going to be amazing ways that you transform, but actually I'm scared shitless. I lean towards the darker side, raise your hand. It's interesting. So it's about a third, well, 1/3 to 2/3, I would say.
David, you crossed the floor.
Well, I think that the question wasn't specified exactly for my satisfaction. So I think that even 10% fear of a negative scenario is enough to be scared.
What about both?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I'll use both. Both. Okay, hope it's divided. Okay, and I don't know. Those who vote because it's just. Right. So it still is more of an optimistic group, and that's interesting. Let's do this. Why don't we take questions now from the floor, and as we answer some of the questions, David and I may jump in to ask Calum follow-up, but we'll start now with you to get a piece of Calum. I see there's already a single question there.
My name is Bob Ackman at the Centre for Global Strategic Analysis. I'd actually like to follow on from what David said. And I guess my question is, how do we have instruct the AIs to prioritize human welfare when we ourselves may not be human? For example, in the presentation you talked about the brain being sliced up and mapped. One of the memes in sci-fi is we upload our minds into machines. I mean, you could have a machine processor in an organic body, you could switch from organic to inorganic. You can see a gradation where we have 1% of the population uploaded, 50% uploaded, 99% uploaded. At which point do we say, actually, humans are now, a minority species? Most of us have evolved to a bigger thing. Are we still prioritizing for a tiny dozen people living like Amishes, or are we going to prioritize an interstellar civilization? How does it work?
I think if we get to upload, we've kind of dodged the bullet. Because, as you say, we then are the superintelligence. We don't have to worry about being attacked by the superintelligence. We are the superintelligence. The problem is that, and you know, the telephone. Always bear in mind the telephone problem of forecasting. But as far as we can tell, it is, albeit a really phenomenally hard project to create an AGI, it's even more hard to upload. And so the most likely sequence of events is we create an AGI, it becomes a superintelligence, and if we're lucky, it likes us, and it works on upload. It works on that problem, solves that problem. We then become part of the superintelligence, and who knows whether we're a hive mind or we remain a collection of individual persons, not too worried about which of those it is, and then we go off and enjoy the cosmic endowment. That's the positive outcome. But I think it's very unlikely we're going to get to upload before AGI.
If I could give a very quick plug for Nick Bostrom's book at this point. So after you've read Calum's book, your mind will be buzzing. And one of the questions you may have is exactly the question that's been raised now, which is, we don't need to worry, do we? Because it's not going to be a matter of humans versus the robots, humans versus the AIs, because we will merge with the robots, we will merge with the AIs, our brains will be enhanced. So we will be as clever as the AI. And Nick Bostrom in his book does look at this possibility, and he gives reasons for thinking that the brain will be very hard to interface in exactly the right way with very powerful AIs. And so we will be cleverer, but we won't be able to accelerate as fast as the AIs. So we might end up by being 10 times or 100 times smarter than we are now, but that will be nothing if the AIs and robots are 1,000,000 times smarter.
It seems we've already got a template on how to build an organism that has morals, and that just be evolution, or the way in which we evolved anyway. So how would we evolve, if that's one way to do it, a moral AI?
Sure. Well, if we had a few million years, then that might be a way to go, although we would be evolving as well, so we might get to superintelligence before this new thing that we're evolving. Evolution is a slow, inefficient way to generate an intelligent being, and we don't know whether our intelligence was evolved for a reason, because it does something useful, or it's just a completely accidental byproduct of something else. The development of AGI through science, which is a fast, purposeful, logical approach, is much quicker. So I think there's zero chance of evolving an AGI quicker than science will create one.
But I think you're asking about how morality will have to change in a world of artificial intelligence. Is that right?
No, I've got the idea that we can already. There's computer programs that sort of evolve morality in digital organisms in a sense, or capabilities. But we could do that really quickly, I imagine, because it's digital. You can just make a model of how a creature would evolve. I don't see why that would have to take billions of years. It seems to me you could be doing that really quickly and teaching it in that way, and then instilling that what's taught through this quick evolution. I don't know, I'm just asking if you know.
So you think we could evolve an AGI kind of in silico?
Yeah, or at least its moral sense.
Right. The ways that I know of creating AGI are not evolution, they are directed scientific approaches, which, as I say, is a quicker way of doing things. The question of how you put morality into an AI is a really important one. In a sense, that's the essence of the friendly AI problem. And as we've said, it's a tricky one, because it's tough to define what is good for humans. And most of the ways you might try and do, so make humans happy. You might say that's the morality, that's the goal we want for a superintelligence, make humans happy. So what the AI does is keeps us all in coffins with intravenous strips and just plugs electrodes straight into our pleasure sensors. It's called wireheading. We're all very happy, but we're effectively done for as a species. It's very hard to define what we want. There's a chap called Kenneth Cukier, I mentioned him. He's the guy who came up with the phrase about the AI may not love you, may not hate you, but it might have different uses for your actions. He's also come up with a concept of coherent extrapolated volition. So that is the idea that you give up on devising a moral code to give to the superintelligence as its program, and you just tell it to do whatever I would do if I was as smart as you are. That's sort of it's a dodge, and it's a clever dodge, and it may be that something along those lines is what we'll end up saying to it.
and yet we've exterminated every weaker species or every weaker society.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
And we ourselves have exterminated every weaker species or every weaker society, so extrapolating ourselves forward may not be...
But if we were as smart as it was, then the idea is it wouldn't do that. It may not be a terribly good argument, I grant you.
Please. When you look at the utopian view of we won't have to work, we won't have to do anything, we can just dedicate our time to the arts and leisure and other kind of things. What worries me is AI will also be better at that. So it will be able to write the best books, it will be able to have the best discussion. So we'd have a discussion on the universal basic income, and then we'd take our phones and it would say, no, actually, you need to do this. So when does it get to the point where we have no control of decisions because we just all accept Google knows how to take me home best. I very accept that. Now, next, I accept it knows what I should do to every aspect of my existence.
Yeah.
At what point do I just become a vestigial organ to an AI?
At what point do we just become utterly demoralised and
Yeah.
all behind the back of the vision there going, oh, you know. Well, actually, if you think about the things you do in your life, it's probably not as bad as that. I don't paint, but if I was a painter, I wouldn't be put off by the fact that I was never, ever, ever going to paint as well as, for instance, Van Gogh or Monet. You know, lots of people do things. I mean, I am a writer, and there are lots of people who are much better writers than I am, but that doesn't stop me writing. So I think the fact that there is this sort of big brother, this big sister out there who is simply better by far at everything I could possibly do than I could ever be, that wouldn't necessarily put me off. Humans still play chess, even though for the last 15 years or so it's been utterly impossible for a human to play chess better than us. But you know, being demoralised by becoming the second smartest creature is a serious worry. There's a nice movie, Wall-E, I'm sure lots of people have seen it. Anybody who's got kids has certainly seen it. And the humans in that, for a long time, are utterly demoralised. They become fat, flappy, whaley type things, sitting in big chairs, while robots do everything for them. Fortunately, they get innovated quite quickly when they realise that the top robot has gone a bit bonkers, and they return to good old feisty, ornery humans. I think the demoralisation problem is far from our biggest problem, I think.
You mentioned that if we could create an AGI, then we will. So surely if we could create an AI that's incredibly more clever than us, then we also will. And would that AI not see us as incredibly primitive? And therefore, whether it likes us or not, it might destroy us like we might stand on an ant and not think too much about it.
Yeah, that is a possible outcome. Personally, I don't think that is going to happen because I think we're going to bend every sinew to stop it happening. But the superintelligence, which was just kind of made without any forethought, it might end up like that. We have to make sure it doesn't end up like that. But the whole point of my book really is to say, look, there's bad outcomes and there's good outcomes. We need to proactively manage the process to make sure that we get the good outcomes.
Please. Hello. I think I'm quite positive and optimistic of what artificial intelligence will be able to do for humans. But the only fear I would say is that, and I think that's probably the fear that most people have, is not the technological aspect of it, but the social aspect of it. So do you think enough research is being done in the aspect of looking at how humans will be keeping themselves busy? Because the problem is, or the fear most people have is that even if someone paid me my regular salary, but said you didn't have to go to work, I'll probably go crazy about that. So we've not really thought enough about how we keep ourselves busy, and also about the legal aspects of it, in terms of relationship between humans and those artificial intelligence. When you have a driverless car on the road, and if there's an accident, who takes responsibility for that? And do they need to have a driving license, do they pay tax and all those kind of things? So do you think enough is being done in that area as well?
So you ask, are we putting enough effort into thinking about the future world in which we have technological unemployment, we have self-driving cars? Short answer is no, absolutely not. And that's why I'm delighted Boston wrote his book. I'm delighted the BBC is doing its Intelligent Machines Week. That's why I wrote my book. I'm delighted you all come here to talk about it. I think we need to think a lot more about these things. You talk about self-driving cars, and they're coming, and I think they will work. there's a lot to sort out. It may well be that a self-driving car will have to make some very awkward decisions. So, for instance, you're driving down the road, a child runs out in the middle of the road. If the car doesn't stop, or actually the car can't stop in time, it knows it can't stop in time, the only way to avoid running the kid over is to run into a bus stop and you run over 5 adults instead. The computer will have to make that decision, and we're going to have to program it to know what to do. Another scenario is that it could avoid the child, but the only way to avoid the child is by driving into a lamppost, which is going to kill the driver. Does the car kill its driver rather than killing the child? That might depend on whether, well, actually, because it's being driven by a computer, it's nothing to do with the human passenger. It's not their fault. So there's all those sorts of problems to be worked out, but I think they will be worked out. Another set is the security issues. The insurance industry is terrified of self-driving cars because they're really nervous about the day that a glitch happens in Google's system, which governs quite a lot of self-driving cars, and suddenly every car on the road turns left, all at the same time. So, and hacking of self-driving cars is another serious problem. There's a lot to work out. So are we putting enough thought and effort into these things yet? No. Part of the reason for that is that politicians naturally and blamelessly think in the terms of the next 5 years. They don't think in terms of the next 15 years on the whole. We need to drag them up by their bootstraps and I think, in the longer term.
Evening, guys. First of all, thank you very much. Really interesting topic. One from me. In your field, I think it's really interesting. What do you think of short and medium term implications for writing, in your case, Calum, and journalism? Yeah.
What do I think of the short, medium terms for writing?
Sorry, implications for writing. Sorry, like writing.
So for writing, okay, I mentioned that there are systems which write newspaper articles. They write pretty good newspaper articles, but in a very narrow range of competence. So they write sports articles and they write financial reports. And interestingly, AP, which uses lots of them, says that all that's happened is, in the good old days when journalism made loads of money, they used to write many, many thousands of financial reports. And then when the money went out of journalism because classified ads went onto the internet and newspapers all went broke, many of them don't know that they're broke yet, but they all went broke. There was less money around for journalists had less time, so they were writing a lot fewer financial reports. And now, because of computers, they're now writing all those financial reports. So they say that's what's happening. I think in the short term and medium term, say 10, 15 years, there's still a future for someone like me to pump out the old book, and if you're a writer, then for you too. Beyond that, I wouldn't care to guess, but chances are, the superintelligence. Well, sorry, we won't be there yet. But chances are that AIs, they may well write lots of books, but there's a market for an enormous number of books, enormous. So, yeah, I think times are good for writers for a fair while yet.
I'm wondering about the quite precise focus of what we've all been discussing so far, which is extremely human-centric, and more than that, it's consciousness-centric and it's brain-centric. So if you looked at the amount of computation that's going on in this room at the moment, there's a portion that's going on in people's heads. There's an enormous amount of computation going on in everybody's guts, in the bacteria which are interacting with themselves and with ourselves. There's also an enormous amount of computation in the ecosphere as a whole and in the progress of evolution, which you could look at as a program running on the ecosphere and progressing from trying out new solutions and new programs and going forward. So I don't really have a question, but I just wonder at the narrowness, really, of the focus of saying, we should do this and we should be preserved and so on. Let's look at something that's a little bit bigger and an ecological viewpoint. The smartphones are now part of the ecology. One could think of these developments as adding to the ecology rather than a new godlike person being imposed upon the top. Let's think about how the ecology is changing.
Why don't we take, I see there's, do you want to tell me?
You must admit, I'm an out-and-out human chauvinist. I really am. I think our minds are much more important than a beetle's mind. I think they're much more important than a bacteria's mind. I'm not sure bacteria has a mind actually, but it does do some computation, I grant you. And I don't believe in Gaia either. So I don't think the Earth is a thinking entity. I think humans are the most interesting and most important entity that we know of in the universe so far, and I suspect you disagree with me, and that's fine. Also, actually, it's worth saying this. The great majority of people in this world are religious. I'm not, I'm an atheist. Religious people, in theory at least, are going to have a huge problem with what we're talking about, because this is all about treating the brain as a machine and treating consciousness as being an entirely materialistic phenomenon. And in theory,
it need not, though, but it need not.
It need not, but it tends to. The way most AI people think is it does come to that reduction sort of model. So in theory, the vast majority of the human population is going to have a big problem with this. I think actually, certainly the Catholics are going to be quick to deal with it, because they're always very good at embracing whatever the latest thing is. They're very flexible. Yeah. Absolutely. The Vatican has some of the leading physicists. It took them a while to accept that the sun didn't go around the Earth, but when they got there, they moved fast.
Do you know when they accepted Galileo's theories?
It was quite late, I know.
In 1990?
Yeah.
96.
Yeah.
No, that's true.
But it's actually, when they get there, they move fast.
Exactly. It takes some time. It's like you say about British institutions, the first 500 years are always the toughest. So, let me press you on that. I don't see any philosophical or religious quandary whatsoever. The reason is, so religion has been there before with the scientific method, and they've always had to readapt what spirituality is relative to what science can provide. And I have a feeling that people are going to understand the artificial intelligence to be an alien intelligence in the same way as the famous aphorism by Noam Chomsky about AI, that to be told that there's a machine that's smarter than a human being is about as interesting as being told that an Olympic weightlifter is not as strong as a bulldozer, right? It's just, these are fundamentally different things. So I'm not sure that that's going to be the point of challenge. I would wonder why you have such a very prejudicial pro-human view. If you're recognizing that we are no longer the uber species, because our minds that have always distinguished us as being the top of the food chain, the more intelligent of everyone, we're no longer now the most intelligent. We've given rise to this new entity that, although based in silicon and not in flesh and blood, is smarter than us. Wouldn't that bring us a new humility to suggest that, in fact, we have to optimize around life in general, not just human life, that we are responsible for a lot of destruction, and that we need to reassess what we do?
Yes. If we become the second smartest species, then I think our privileged position disappears, it evaporates overnight. I think what gives us the privileged position is that we are, as far as we know, and it's a pretty safe bet, we're the smartest, most evolved consciousness. If we no longer had that role, then I think an AGI, a superintelligence, would have a pretty reasonable argument to say it had become more important than us.
Well, are we living in that world now, where people believe in God, which is a creature that is more intelligent, and we still think we're privileged because it's working in our favour, apparently?
Well, if you believe in God, if you're a religious person, then you don't think that humans are the top of the chain. You think God is.
Yeah.
And so actually, it's worth coming back to your question about why is religion going to be a problem. One word: soul. Religious people, at least in theory, believe that there is this God-given spirit inside them. And we are not allowed to, and in fact it's blasphemous to try to recreate very intelligent life, because we don't have the right, we don't have the power, we don't have the right to create similar intelligent entities. I think they're wrong, but in theory they're going to have a big problem with all this.
So do you remember what when God told Adam and Eve they were not allowed to take a tree? What was the tree of?
Hang on, run that by me again.
The tree in Eden that they were not allowed to eat the fruit of, it was the tree of? Knowledge, retrieve knowledge. They saw things as they were. They saw the nakedness afterwards. There's a bunch of questions. Let's go for them. I'm wondering if we should take a whole bunch and then respond, or if we go one by one. Yeah, we get the thumbs up. Let everyone just, if you have a comment, make it short. If you have a question, make it short as well, but ask the question. But I don't want to only say you have a question. I mean, you could have a comment. And let's get a slew of them, bring it back to Calum, have a couple more repartees.
This is a question about the premise of good and bad and morality. Not really a question, just like a thought. I don't understand why we need to be polarizing these things, why things need to be either good or bad. I don't understand how everything is not inherently good and bad. And in social choice theory, there's something called Arrow's paradox, which is like, basically, this is why democracy doesn't really work. It can only be like the least worst situation, because you can't really get consensus or collective input on morality, because we all just we all have our own variation and disagreements about it. So you couldn't really program something static, like you can have like first priority human life, second priority earth life, because we're just not, that's just not black and white, like it's just not good and bad. So I don't understand the premise.
Okay.
So maybe it's a question of safety and not safety versus good or evil. So I certainly want to live in a world that's got safe AI rather than unsafe AI.
Hi, Ronan of Heresy AI. So I would see the future really as a vast number of very intelligent machines with an even far more vast number of not so intelligent machines or lesser intelligent machines. And we're somewhere in the middle between all of that. I don't see that there is an us and them will be also part of it. And there will be a myriad of smart, intelligent machines. And also, it's not necessarily good and bad. There will be inherently, we built the machine, so it'll be full of mistakes. And it will make lots of horrendous mistakes, and hopefully learn from them.
Hi, hello for the presentation, really informative. So going back to the whole thing of whether something is positive or negative, is there any proof, anything that happened the last year that really proves that AI is basically negative for humans? Or is it just the way that in the 80s it was communicated, just like the figures that basically you showed in the beginning of your presentation? Or is it in the end that basically Batman will become stronger than Superman? Thank you.
Yeah, why don't we go and you can respond and then we'll take another batch. Yeah.
I'm not sure I entirely understood the point of the first question, but are there things which are good and things which are bad? I think torturing babies is bad, and I think falling in love is good. I think there are things which are good and there are things which are bad, and I think we should seek the things which are good. I fear that didn't answer your question at all, but that is what you made me think. The chat in the back about a myriad of intelligent beings, you may very well be right, we don't know. But one thing that's worth thinking about is if this myriad of intelligent beings includes a myriad of superintelligences, and if these superintelligences are recursively self-improving, so one day they're 1 million times smarter than us, and the next day they're 10 million times smarter than us, and there's thousands of these things around, the chances that one of them will go rogue and decide, I don't like those humans, they're a bad lot, are higher, I guess, than if there's only one superintelligence and we've worked very hard to make sure it's safe. So I suspect that a world of a singleton superintelligence is safer than a world with many superintelligences.
So that goes totally against everything that we know about ecologies and healthcare and the internet and the power of decentralization. This idea of centralizing things would be creating a single point of failure that would be far more likely for us to be vulnerable to collapse. And when you decentralize things and you have variation in the system, like a genetic algorithm would have variation and would try different techniques to find the optimal. When you don't have any one single optimal, but you have many, we know that that's how we've had the success of AI, by not adopting John McCarthy's LISP technique, but ensembling 5 different types of learning algorithms, right? One which deals with classification, one which is random forest, one which is doing nearest neighbor, one which is doing Bayes. So if you wanted to put all your money in a single bank, that's great. If it's Lehman Brothers, you're out of luck. And if everyone is Lehman Brothers, it's a problem. We like systems. We like complex systems that interact as long as they're safe. I don't see a world in which you would walk a single AI. I don't even think you could. And if you did, I mean, the benefit of having multiple AIs is you would get innovation on top of it at different paces. And when the bad guys get their AI, the good guys can have their AI to combat the bad guys' AIs. I invite you to respond.
Okay, so that's fine when you've got an ecology of things which are on a par and none of them are super powerful. But if you've got an ecology where, dozens of these things are Superman times a million, and each one of them has the ability to destroy the world, that's a different game altogether. I agree with you completely. I'm not in favour of super centralisation in the general case, but in the case where some of these things are superintelligences, and I take that to lead very quickly to superpower, a massive superpower. You don't want, say, 100,000 Vladimir Putins with your finger on very, very powerful nuclear bombs all over the place.
True, but you also don't want 100,000 Richard Nixons or Ronald Reagans or LBJs. And so the whole Metternickian system in international relations has been balance of power. And you would imagine that we have that already with AI in Silicon Valley, where you have Google and Facebook and Amazon and Apple, these large empires that have been built around. We have it in the AI world in terms of the research, because you've got China going its way, you've got France doing something, you've got Britain, and you've got America. Wouldn't we simply recreate that same positive tension that creates a balance of power, but also creates innovation, because there is no end point in terms of the intelligence. It's always going to be improving, and it's going to have to improve at the hardware level as well as at the software level, as well as at the data generation level. So I think wouldn't you expect to see a variety of AIs and a healthy competition, or maybe even an unhealthy competition?
Well, I think with AIs, with narrow AIs, absolutely. You want a flourishing ecosystem. There's 1,000 AIs flourish. But when it gets to superintelligence, it's a different game. I think the way to think about it is every single one of them has its finger on a very powerful nuclear bomb. You don't want dozens of those.
True, but one superintelligence is like the Einstein superintelligence. The other superintelligence is like the Picasso superintelligence. A third superintelligence is the Norman Mailer superintelligence. Right?
You're thinking too small, Ken. I mean, it's way beyond Picasso and Einstein. These things are millions times cleverer than Einstein. They can invent a whole new physics which destroys space-time overnight.
Fair enough, but I don't see. Look, I see it on a vector. I don't see it as a sort of a funnel that becomes ever expansive into everything around the known universe. I mean, so say we are going to presume that the AI is learning, right? And the AI is improving itself to learn more. Now, it is relying on data to learn, and the data is going to be largely retrospective, so it loses a touch of innovation. So there's imperfection built into it. In fact, some of the fears of why we're going to be headed down to our peril is because of the imperfection, that blind spots that we only see after it decides that it's going to press me for a button to save the cockroaches, right?
Let's take a few more questions from the audience.
Yeah, good idea.
We should answer the last question though, which was, is there proof that it's going to be negative?
Hold that one up.
And the answer is no. There's no proof. We don't know.
Phil Trevor from Thought Processing Software. My question is about the politics. We talked about religion. We talked about how to control this thing. How do you see the politicians handling it? Because they don't seem to be able to handle email.
You're trying to get me to offend absolutely everybody, aren't you? Religious people, now you want me to have a go at politicians. I think politicians will be dragged into taking these matters seriously by public opinion.
I wanted to ask about the economic development of AI, in that historically technological advances have been used by particular regions to dominate, wider regions, and I assume the main development will be in the industrialized advanced nations, and is that going to be a basis for dominating poorer nations?
Potentially, yes, but I'm less pessimistic in the word. I'm less scathing, if you like, about the way that the Industrial Revolution has rolled out around the world. And actually, what we used to call the developed world has improved the life prospects of people who live there unbelievably. Our lives are so much better than our great-grandparents' lives. And recently, China's joined us. Broadly speaking, they've got a long way to go. India's starting to join us as well. And Africa is starting to join us. Sure, there's been oppression, there's been abuse, there's been exploitation, but broadly speaking, technology has enabled human lives to get fantastically better. We live at the best time there's ever been to be a human. And we've also made the fantastically wise decision to be born and grow up in the developed world. So, we've won life's lottery. I think our children will do even better if we get these big challenges right, and they are big challenges.
So, Calum, just to bring it back to 2015, because I love the moment you go, well, uploading is really, really hard, as if you tried it this weekend and you want it. The question I want to ask specifically about how communicators, journalists, and specifically authors talk about this notion of artificial intelligence with an almost accidental anthropomorphism and a relational intelligence, because it's very much related to how we define intelligence, i.e. for the human. So how do we get away from throwing out these terms machine, robot, AI, and lumping them all together? Watson has this specific problem, and we've done some work with Watson dealing with how they talk about what Watson is. They call it Watson. It has a human name, and they claim that Watson has confidence. But yet, when the press turn around and say that Watson's prescribing, they get very cagey. But no, Watson isn't prescribing. It's artificially, or it's intelligence augmentation of the doctor. It's not artificial intelligent doctors. And there's a real issue, especially in the press and UK press at the moment, with throwing these terms around for the clickbait without spending time understanding what the differences and the nuances are when it comes to language. Do we need new metaphors?
Yeah, that's a good question. And sure, we are all, and I'm absolutely guilty of this myself, we anthropomorphize AI, just like we anthropomorphize our cars, our boats, all the tools that we have. Somebody said that we shouldn't call it artificial intelligence in the way that we don't call planes artificial birds. We should just call it intelligence. And fair enough, but we do need to distinguish it from a human brain. So I actually think the word machine intelligence, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that would be a good name for it. But that's not going to happen, because the word AI has stuck. That's out there. That meme has taken very firm hold, and I doubt very much it will change. Maybe it will. Cars used to be called horseless carriages, so perhaps some new word will be found for it. That won't, of course, get rid of the problem of anthropomorphizing, which is a huge temptation that we have. We look at the dog's eyes when it's looking at us, and we know that actually it's evolved to have those big eyes because it means it gets fed. It's evolved to produce an emotional reaction in us. It gives us nice dopamine charges or whatever they are. I can't remember. And we've evolved to live in synergy. But we think, oh, the dog likes me. The dog thinks I'm nice. Or the dog thinks I'm the boss. The dog doesn't think anything like that. The dog's thinking food, food, food. Anthropomorphizing is almost irresistible temptation. We have to get better at resisting it. I think it probably get easier, actually, the smarter the machines get.
When listening to Calum, I just thought of two potential scenarios, one positive and one negative, and I would like to know your opinion about those scenarios. Now, the positive scenario I have called the Bodhisattva AI, and the negative scenario I called the Eastern Front. Now, what I mean by the Bodhisattva AI is that Bodhisattvas are supposed to enlighten everyone else once they reach enlightenment.
So perhaps if the AI is that powerful, in order to enhance itself, it will enhance us, and if that means mind uploading because the BCIs will still be crap, even though we're working on that, then so be it. So that is the positive version of it.
Okay, got that one. What's the Western Front?
Eastern Front. Now, Eastern Front is the negative scenario, and that sort of brings me back old memories. I mean, back in school, obviously I was taught that, well, at some point there would be universal abundance, so we won't really need to have any non-creative work, and the machines would do it all for us, and the resources would be pretty much unlimited, and everyone would get according to their needs and give according to their abilities, and that's called communism, and it will happen because of the so-called law of the historical inevitability, Marxism, and so forth. So what has been an anathema in the US obviously was the mainstream ideology in the SU, and that's no news for me. I mean, I was actually taught that all of that was foreseen by Lenin. Now that's a red scenario which we have talked about it, and the opposite of it could be what I would call the brown scenario, where all those useless people would simply be turned into fertilizer and disassembled into organs, whatever, and the final battle would be between the red and the brown, with the brown perhaps being far more ruthless and effective, but the red obviously having a much larger manpower because all the useless people would become as foot soldiers, effectively fighting for their survival as the new Red Army. And there is no space for anything which is even remotely close to what is called Western style democracy in that scenario. So
Okay.
what do you think about that?
Okay, what I think about that is I prefer your bodhisattvas.
That's actually the blue scenario. Oh, we got it. I'll figure out. Sorry.
You have to dumb down a bit.
Get it, Krishna?
Okay. Okay, this has been touched on, but not the way I think about it. So, what do you think the role of human evolution is? So, applying the re-engineering of intelligence to ourselves, not augmentation. So, not. I know David's mentioned Nick Bostrom dismissal, if you like, or quantification that is fundamentally limited. But what about on the way towards getting artificial general intelligence? We're augmenting ourselves so you can navigate the tube better because you just are aware of the information that's relevant and you can think faster on certain subjects and so on.
I just think that, as David said, we're going to get overtaken. As fast as we might improve our own intellectual proficiency using smart drugs, using brain-computer interfaces when Andrew's got them sorted out, and whatever other methods we might approach, we're going to get overtaken by AGI, if it's possible, and if it happens in the sort of timeline that people think of.
When you all made some very salient points about why we need to look at this, we need to invest in these future humanity institutes and all that. But are these discussions completely moot if Google, Facebook, they're not on board? Because it's in their business interest to make AI seem harmless. Eric Schmidt wrote an article for BBC the other day, AI is harmless. They don't want to bring this discussion to the table, so how do we force them to be honest about what they're doing?
I think they are interested in these debates. I think people like, Elon Musk is an investor in quite a few AI companies. He's a good friend of Larry Page. Page and Brin are not unaware of these debates, and I think they are vitally involved in them. And I think, actually I think there's a lot of commerce, intellectual commerce goes on between the Future of Humanity Institute, the Future of Life Institute, and the big tech companies. I think they're all thinking about the same thing now. If you were Larry Page, would you talk publicly about Terminator? You wouldn't encourage that idea. One thing that's going to happen is as more people get to think seriously about these issues, there's going to be a group of people, not a particular identifiable group in any one place, but there's going to be, there are going to be people around the world who will just decide this is going to be bad. However hard these guys work at it, it's going to be bad. And so I'm going to stop it. There'll be people who, in the movie Transcendence, which got panned, I think it's actually a pretty good movie, there's this terrorist organisation, Rift, which said, look, however hard you work at making AI good, it's going to be bad. So we're going to kill you all. All the AI researchers are going to get killed. And one AGI researcher has had death threats already. So I wouldn't be welcoming that if I was in the AI industry. I think the AI industry's got a very interesting PR problem. A very interesting PR problem.
But it is public knowledge that Google, when they bought DeepMind, the AI company that did that amazing Atari simulation, they put in place, at the request of DeepMind, an ethics advisory board to review many of these questions. So I think they don't want to talk terribly publicly about it, but they are investing and they're internally thinking very hard about these questions.
Can I ask a question about the role of military research? I mean, military research brings us good things like the internet, but also thinking of the Manhattan Project, it brought us Fat Man to drop on Hiroshima. You mentioned all these big commercial companies. What about the whole defense research assessment, how they want to use it?
For sure. The military is very, very interested in AI and working hard to develop all sorts of interesting ways to kill people. There's a huge debate about whether we should ever allow an AI to pull the trigger, whether to use the emoji shorthand, whether we should ever allow the robot to pull the trigger. And there's kind of a consensus has grown out that no, we must always have a human make the final kill decision, because humans have moral accountability and AIs don't. I mean, there's a small minority of people who think that's not right. I think if you have an AI system in the battlefield, and it is better able to discriminate between a combatant and a civilian, then I would rather have the AI decide who gets to die and who doesn't, than a soldier who's exhausted, possibly wounded, and quite likely to make the wrong decision. But I seem to be in a pretty small minority on that.
Okay. Sadly, that is all the time we have for questions, but I would like, Calum will be here, he'll be willing to sign some books, to make money. You can go online and find his book as well, but before you go, I want to give you the last word, Calum. What is the one thing that you would like to leave us with as we go home tonight and sort of ruminate upon this issue?
That it's great that you've all come here to talk and listen and think about this subject. I think, I'm a bit biased obviously, I think it's the most important subject that humans can think about. But I think it's great that you've all come here to do it, and I think you should talk to all your friends and get them to think about it. Obviously you should get them to buy the book, but more than that, we as a species, we need to think about this stuff. I think the outcomes can be great, but there are big risks. And we will only avoid the big risks if we decide to and work hard at it.
Great, thank you very much, Calum. Thank you, David.
A couple of follow-ups that people may be interested in. We've already heard tell of Brave New World as one means to explore some of these ideas. I've been advising and working with a theatre company that's producing a very interesting adaptation of Brave New World. So if you want to get a different part of your brain and spirit activated, you may want to track that down. It's not showing in London yet, but it's showing in various provincial cities such as Oxford, Wolverhampton, Chelmsford, Blackpool, and so on between now and Christmas. Something that is happening in London, I finally wanted to slip in a quick mention of a place where a lot of this discussion will continue with multiple speakers. It is the anticipated 2040 conference, which is taking place on Saturday, the 3rd of October in Birkbeck College. There are altogether 11 speakers there. Calum will be one of these 11 speakers, giving a slightly different spin on some ideas, along with many other speakers who are all addressing the question of what is a roadmap to sustainable abundance. How do we actually build an environment, a society, a civilization that takes advantage of what technology offers us without destroying anything that's good in the process, things like the environment or indeed many aspects of humanity. So if you want to continue the discussion, by all means stay in this room, talk with the authors, take away a copy of the book, but also look out for these other forthcoming events. And I hope to see many of you at Anticipating 2040. And I'd like to say thank you very much to Kenneth Cukier for running this event. And if you can, do you have any final thoughts? Or what have you changed your mind about tonight? Or are you as relentlessly optimistic as you outlined in the first 5 minutes?
That's a great question. I'm not relentlessly optimistic. I'm always struck by these conversations by just how deeply, deeply complex they are. And I tend to believe, I have this natural inclination that it is our emotional content that machines will never have. The idea of being born, knowing that we're going to die, that may not be the case in the future, but in the conceivable future is, and love and rejection of love that make us, as part of the human condition, that only Mozart, a human being, could develop Mozart, because it's all, the emotional content is so huge in it. All it is emotion. Machines may do better, and so I'm willing to be more humble and say, well, there is no, on first principles, there's no reason why that emotional content of our humanity should somehow be sacrosanct. I look forward to seeing what happens.